Hey everyone, welcome back to your Dawn of Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are ending an incredible month that we've dedicated to this theme of crossover tech. It's been sponsored by Kongsberg Geospatial, so we thank them. And today we have a global company with us here, ideaForge, and their product manager, Raghav Mallick. And so great to have you on the show, Raghav.
Thanks, Don. It's really, really great to be here.
And everybody, just a reminder, number one, this is live. Another reminder, this is actually part of the Volatus Above and Beyond series. So for the past couple years, Volatus has graciously endowed the appearance of several companies almost every month across this show. And in this case, we get to have ideaForge because of Volatus. So we're very thankful to them. And so Raghav, you are coming to us from India live. I know it's late there. We really appreciate you. For those that don't know much about you, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Don, like you mentioned, as of today, I am a product manager here at ideaForge. Uh, I've been at ideaForge for 5.5 years now, nearly 6 years now. Uh, but my background was a bit different. I started my career a bit differently. I sort of logically but accidentally fell into drones. And the reason I say that is probably when I was 5 or 6 years old, I was always fascinated with the space industry. And very early on, I think I'd made the decision to study aerospace. And uh, that ended up happening. And I went to college for my bachelor's in aerospace engineering. I even started my first job in the space industry, but uh, slowly and steadily, I realized that there's not really much of a market for at that time for aerospace engineers. Drones really wasn't a thing. Most of the jobs out there for aerospace engineers was sort of the traditional uh, jobs that still exist today, but the scale of the industry wasn't as much as it was today. So I ended up taking an adjacent role in a robotics company, and sort of had to learn robotics from scratch because although I started out as an associate there, I slowly grew to head their engineering division, and I had to learn all about autonomy, about software development, because I came purely from a hardware background. And then I started assessing my team's code, and these were smart young guys fresh out of university. So uh, although I found some success in that company, I always wanted to get back to my roots of aerospace, right? And luckily, that also coincided with the time that drones became a really big thing. And uh, that's when I first heard of ideaForge. I think they were one of the first companies in India to get a major investment as an OEM, and that really sort of caught my attention. And through someone at that company, I met the CEO Ankit, and after like my first meeting with him, pretty much realized I think this is where I want to work. It's logical. You have that aerospace background, you've learned robotics, so accidentally, but perhaps on purpose, fell into the drone industry. And I've been here for nearly 5 6 years now. And now with an ideaForge, although I've fallen into the product management function, uh, and I'm responsible for perhaps all of our software and autonomy stack, I've also done a lot of work on the regulatory side with the company. So it's been a long journey career-wise and with ideaForge, and it's just great to share that with everyone today.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're a perfect living example of how interconnected all of these technologies are. I don't think people appreciate how much space impacts all of these things, robotics, autonomy, aerospace, and your engineering background is absolutely incredible. So thank you for sharing that journey with us. And tell us a little bit about ideaForge, because, we have a lot of startups on this show, but ideaForge has been, as we say in the US, around the block for a while. They're not new kids on the block, So ideaForge started what, 15 plus years ago?
Yes, yes. So uh, I'll maybe start at the start of ideaForge's journey. So The idea for the company really started about 15, like you mentioned, 15 plus years ago, where our founders were still in college in IIT Bombay. That's one of the premier engineering institutes of India. And at that time, one of the co-founders wanted to actually build a hovercraft. And in the process of building a hovercraft, they actually realized, wait, this can fly. And they sort of independently stumbled upon the quadcopter configuration. And in that process, back then, I think this was around 2004, 2005, the open source ecosystem didn't really exist where you could just go out into a local hobby shop or online and just order an autopilot, order a arm, order a propeller, and just assemble something. So these were
Right.
essentially completely made from scratch, including the autopilot. And I think
Wow.
somewhere around that time, although the use case was not identified, I think the team did a lot of work in just miniaturizing and making the technology just work really well. And I believe they even won the micro aerial vehicle competition somewhere in the late 2000s. And I think they tied with MIT. Our founders tied with MIT that year. I think I'll have to get back to you on that, but that was a big win, right? So,
Yeah, for sure.
and after that, uh, somewhere around, so we all know about the Mumbai attacks that happened, right, in 2011, where it was a very unfortunate incident. And uh, a lot of what was happening was the forces on ground to get more intelligence, on ground intelligence from that occurrence, were using helicopters to actually try to look into the buildings. And
Right.
I think
Not
when
super effective or efficient in terms of dollars and cents, or in your case, rupees. I know those operations are very expensive and they're dangerous.
Absolutely, yes. So safety was a major factor because it is like in the heart of the urban center, and you have a lot of buildings in Mumbai. Mumbai is a very congested city. So I think that's when our founders realized that, hey, if we just had a camera on this thing, they probably didn't need to fly a helicopter. And that's where I would say ideaForge's roots as a public safety drone company started.
Yeah.
We're about 10-15 years on from that, and we have diversified to both live video and mapping use cases. But everything from our autopilot and our airframe and our entire tech stack sort of emerged from that pivotal moment where they realized that this is a technology with a use case that can bring immense value, increase safety, and essentially keep the entire ecosystem safe. And that's sort of where the company emerged from. And I think 10, 15 years later, we've hit some really great milestones. So I think we
Yeah, before we
celebrated.
before we get into all of those, I want to interrupt you for a second because they say necessity is the mother of invention, and I think this is also a great living example of that. We've seen that here also in the U.S. with, as an example, Brink. Out of the horrific um, Las Vegas shootings. And the SWAT team having really no situational awareness up high into that hotel window, thinking, man, if we had, some kind of a drone that could look in there, that would be so much safer and we could have maybe saved more lives. So, I think we see this, quite a bit in this industry that, something happens and it sparks this innovation that, wow, we could really help society if we do something different here. And, one thing I also want to highlight before we get into, more into the company and your milestones, because I know you've had even more recent ones, but many through the years. Just want to highlight a couple things about the Indian drone market, which I think is really unique, and maybe people don't quite appreciate. I learned a bit when I listened to your Clubhouse with Maggie last week. By the way, everybody, if you missed that, you can catch that on replay. It was a spectacular interview. Um, One of the things that you mentioned was, unlike in the US, the drone market or industry in India really wasn't connected or born out of a recreational hobby. It was more out of this necessity, as you mentioned. Can you talk a little, just very briefly about that?
Yeah, so I think this this trend probably started somewhere around 2013, 2014. So India as a country is really unique in terms of both its geopolitical situation and also its internal security situation, right? So our law enforcement and our public safety officials have to be maybe 10x, 20x, 30x more careful uh, with what is allowed and what isn't allowed compared to the West. And that's just the reality that we all live in to ensure we all are safe, right? And when drones started becoming a thing, uh, of course, the immense value could be seen, but there is, I mean, we all know that there is also a big potential for misuse, right? And
Yes, sure.
I think because of that in 2013, 2014, India actually had a drone ban in the civilian sector. So,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
And that was right around the time, just thinking back, that in the US, we were doing these they called them Part 333 approvals. It was about 3 years before our Part 107 got published. But that's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that was one thing that happened, and I think because of that, the traditional RC flying hobbyist market that did exist in India, but probably not at the scale as it was in the US, really couldn't grow and evolve the way it has globally. But two things happened. So one is that the government didn't just ban drones and they said full stop, right? Right around that moment is also when policymakers started going to industry and saying, okay, how do we actually make drones safe for everyone while still taking care of the public safety issue of having it potentially having everyone with a drone. So
Right.
that's the first positive thing that happened. And I think the second thing that happened is they still said government and public safety officials can still use drones. So they were still allowed to use drones. And if you see, most of the Indian OEMs who've been in the game for a while have primarily served those use cases first, because those were the first use cases, A, that were legal, and B, that were big enough to make sense, right? Public safety, any government use case, mapping, for example. So uh, once we arrived there, we came into the second problem of uh, the people who wanted to use drones obviously did not come from the hobbyist background. They were actually end users of data, not really end users of the drone.
Oh,
So
interesting. Right. So they're not used to flying.
exactly. So for example, a public safety official will care less about roll pitch and yaw and will care more about how far can I zoom in, can I read that number plate, can
Right.
I detect, identify, or recognize that person. So we had to build our systems autonomy first for that reason. So to deal with churn in government organizations and to ensure predictable outcomes across the varying skills of operators, right? You may have someone who's really skilled, you may have someone who's just fresh into their organization. You want to ensure that the outcomes are not impacted by the skill of the operator.
Right.
So because of that, if you notice, most of the Indian industry, especially us who've been there for a while, uh, at least for ideaForge, autonomy is a huge thing. We've been autonomy first for that reason. And I think that's the biggest distinction I've seen between the US and India, where US has had such a robust hobbyist ecosystem that everyone loves to fly stick, right? Whereas India, the end users are the one actually flying the drone. And because of that, we've had to be autonomy first.
Wow, that's incredible. That is a huge difference. The other thing you mentioned geopolitical, but during Clubhouse you also mentioned the very unique geography
Yes.
in India that also helped shape the drones that you designed. We're going to talk about those drones in a second, everybody. So we're getting there. Don't worry. This is really important background because your geography is so diverse in India, and you had to fly in all kinds of conditions. So tell us a little bit about that and how that informed kind of the design thinking at ideaForge.
Yeah, absolutely. So India is also unique, both, like you mentioned, both geopolitically and geographically. And even the combination of both is unique. And what I mean by that is the battlefield in which our forces deploy is very unique compared to other places in the world, right? It's high altitude, it's cold, you don't have much scope to take things to the last mile. Sometimes you're deployed in places with very little infrastructure. And the next day you may be deployed to a desert, which
Wow.
is completely hot, dusty, sandy, and
Right. So
this
one
the same
extreme to the other.
absolutely, and the same extreme extends to the equipment that they use, and that would include the drones. So, uh, for that reason, we've had to engineer some of our drones to be able to survive flying one day in a desert and the other day in high altitude terrain. And there are very few products globally that are actually qualified to do that. And I would say for that reason, as a company, we love saying that, we might be born in India, but we're already ready for the world. And that's because of the unique uh, testing ground that India offers us as an OEM.
Right. So you started in public safety, expanded. I know you've been working extensively with the Indian military forces and also on the commercial side. I want to talk about those milestones, but before we do, I think it's a great time to talk about the drones. I know you have designed many drones, but you really want to focus on two today. And so the Switch, I believe, is your fixed wing, and then
Yep.
your Netra 4 V4 Pro. So let's talk about the Switch first. I think we have an image of that up now. Tell us about the Switch.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Switch is probably one of our most qualified products. This is standard issue with some of the companies in the Indian infantry today. It's designed to be completely disassembled and assembled on field. It's completely toolless. It's designed to be backpacked, so it's less than 15 pounds maximum takeoff weight.
Wow.
Battery operated, flies for over 2 hours with the payload. And the reason we've designed it like that is at the last mile, sometimes our customers don't have much more than a generator. So they can't rely on traditional fuel. So we've had to sort of give them the same electric battery tech from what they're used to, something that they can just plug into the generator. On top of that, we've had to make it light enough so that they're not constrained on where they operate it from. And lastly, like I mentioned, it's qualified to fly in cold and hot terrain. It's a completely versatile last mile product. And in fact, if you see in the image, you'll see that the wings are actually a different material than the mid wing. The side wings are different than the mid wing, and that as well is because what we noticed is every time there is a bit of wind and it lands, the first thing that gets impacted are your wings. After the landing gear, it's the wings. And those are also one of the first places where if you had, let's say, a traditional carbon fiber wing, that's where cracks start coming in the first. And one crack in a wing like that, it's hard to repair. You essentially sometimes have to replace the entire wing. Or if it's a single molded airframe, you have to replace the entire airframe. With the Switch, the wings are made of hard EPP foam, and it is strong enough where you could put it on the floor, jump on it. I mean, at trade shows, I love to take the wing, I love to punch it, I love to try to smash it against the wall, and you can actually just pop it right back in and fly it again. And that's one thing I love about the Switch is, we've really, really designed it with the end user in mind. It's completely optimized for their operation. And I think within its weight class, I've not really found a product that has that kind of performance or flight time globally. So it's a really unique product, and we're really, really excited to have this in the US.
So, speaking of trade shows, I met your team at Commercial UAV 2 years ago for the first time. I think it was your big entrance into the US. And my producer, Mike, and I had the privilege of doing an interview in your booth at that show. We'll drop that link so you guys can go back and watch it. But I remember specifically seeing the Switch. It was, and picking it up. It was so light. You guys had the backpack there to kind of illustrate the size of it and everything like that. And the styrofoam made it so easy to lift. I thought that was awesome. So it was really cool to see that. So you mentioned, all of these different characteristics of the Switch. What use cases, and in terms of milestones, do you have milestones that you first met with the Switch? And then kind of what use cases are you mostly employing the Switch for?
So at the time when the big procurement for the Switch ended, I believe it was the largest procurement for that category of UAV globally. It
Oh,
was, I
wow.
think, roughly $20 million is what was reported. And at
And was
that
that
time,
with
for
the
a
military or
yeah,
who yeah, okay.
it was the military, and in fact, the primary use case with Switch at that time and continues to be ISR, live video streaming, security surveillance. That has been the primary use case for the switch. But now we've also started getting a lot of questions from our customers saying, okay, now we have this for surveillance
Yep.
or for ISR. Can we
Sure.
do mapping with this? Because even military customers need to generate high quality maps so they can do their mission planning operations, right? Reverse load
Absolutely.
calculation, bridging
Yeah.
operations, and we're hoping to get that capability on Switch very, very soon. We've done some testing already with that customer, and we're hoping we can have a military mapping release of the Switch very, very soon. So if you are a customer buying the Switch for ISR, hopefully you can buy a mapping payload along with it as well very soon. Fingers crossed. We're working really hard to get that to you guys.
So that's, I guess, I don't know if we talked about this. What um, weight can the Switch carry? Some of these payloads are kind of heavy. I know you talked about the focus on miniaturization and autonomy in the very beginning of the design. But today, like how much of a payload can that Switch carry?
So the Switch isn't really designed with payload carriage in mind,
Yep, yep.
and so if it had to, it would be somewhere around 650 grams or so. It's not really designed for lifting. So within that, uh, I would say within those parameters, a traditional live video streaming payload, high zoom payload, and a mapping payload, those are what usually fit, and we're trying to optimize those use cases best on this platform.
Okay, that makes sense. Very, very cool. You should be talking to Kongsberg because they've got the TerraLens product and Iris terminal for the commercial side that takes all of that imagery and kind of overlays all the different maps and geographies onto it. But so tell us about was there anything else you want to talk about with regards to the Switch? You talked about this ISR mission, or on the civilian side, at least in the US, we call it situational awareness. If it's not a military operation, maybe it's a, law enforcement or, Department of Interior or somebody like this, and there's an incident for disaster response. They'll call that situational awareness and assessment, or incident awareness and assessment. Perfect use cases for the Switch. Obviously born out of the Mumbai terror attacks. What other use cases, you're talking about this military mapping. Are there others that you wanted to highlight before we move on to the Netra V4 Pro?
No specific use cases as such. I think any customer who wants high flight time, right? Customers who need to be in the air for long would appreciate both these platforms. But one thing I do really want to highlight about both the Switch and the V4 Pro, although this is born out of the Switch being a product we've sold to the military, is that the Indian military, because of India's geopolitical situation, has very similar security sensitivities as, I would say, the US, right? So we also have certain sensitivities to having components coming in from China. So because of that, the Switch and the V4 Pro had to be NDAA compliant out of the box for our customers. Obviously, we don't call it NDAA in India,
Right, right.
but the idea is the same. We have to have that flexibility in our supply chain to serve those customers. And in the US, we'd be happy to, serve that same set of customers who have similar restrictions to our customers here.
Makes a ton of sense. So tell us about the Netra V4 Pro. Here's a picture of it.
Absolutely. And I'm super excited about this product. And the reason is, we've gotten some feedback, even in the US, about our Switch that, sometimes, so of course, VTOLs give you great flight time. But because of the nature of it being a fixed wing, sometimes the wind resistance does become a constraint for operations in slightly more challenging environments. So, in our experience, the regular V4, which is another variant of this, which flies for 60 minutes, we found better performance in higher wind conditions for that product. But obviously, you were still half the flight time of a Switch, right? So, how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah.
So, because that happened, we decided to push ourselves to the limit and see how much could we actually make a quadcopter fly? So within that same, roughly the same weight budget as a Switch, qualified similarly to a Switch, with the same payload capability as the Switch, we built the Netra V4 Pro with a 90-minute flight time with the payload. And this does both surveillance and mapping. So this is really a product for customers who don't want to land. They want to stay in the air. And they have the operational constraints where maybe a fixed wing VTOL doesn't make sense for them.
That's incredible. So, and I know most of our viewers are very savvy in the drone market, but VTOL is vertical takeoff and landing, for those that don't know, just so nobody's confused about that. So both of these aircraft then take off vertically and land vertically, which is awesome because you don't need a big swath of, either a runway or a big swath of land to get these things up in the air and to get them back down safely. Speaking of safety, we talked a little bit about this idea of cybersecurity and kind of NDAA compliance. What safety features did you guys kind of design into both of these aircraft to ensure that people on the ground and other people in the air, other planes, or maybe even buildings like in an urban environment, that safety is always job number one. What did you incorporate into the aircraft to ensure safety?
So, great question. I think safety for any of our products always starts from prior to takeoff, right? So, one of the main things we've always given our pilots is tools to make sure where they intend to take off from is appropriate and safe. So one of the big features that we have is we call it a coverage area check, where you just set a virtual home location on our ground control software. You click on the button, and it'll, based on the elevation data of the terrain, it'll just draw a circle and show you what your actual coverage will be.
Oh, wow.
So that's one great feature that I love showing our customers. Second is, say you're okay with your home location, but your target is actually outside the circle.
Okay.
Technically, you have high zoom, right? So you should be able to stand at the edge of where you can fly and zoom in even further, because that just shows you the physical location of where you can fly. So
Okay.
this other feature, you can right click on the map and you can set a target location there, and it will give you recommendations based on where you can actually fly to look at that target, based on how far you can
Oh,
zoom in.
okay.
So before I've even taken off, I know what's my appropriate home location and what are the appropriate places at which I can look at a target. Then after that, we allow the user to mark out 3D obstacles on the map. So if there is a new building that wasn't there before, that's not part of the global elevation data, you can actually draw a polygon and extrude it up on the GCS, and that sort of creates a virtual obstacle which the drone will always avoid. And this obstacle is also taken into account in your coverage check and your target check. So it'll never give you wrong information when you combine these two features. In addition to that, we have a lot of return to home features, but where we are a bit different is, for example, in our battery failsafe, we don't actually have a static voltage or a percentage cutoff saying we alert the pilot when there's only 20% battery left, so they
Okay.
should return. What we've actually found is, because our systems have actually pretty high range,
Yep.
sometimes if the customer's surveilling the target for a long time at that range, sometimes 20, even 30% battery is not enough to come back home, especially if wind conditions aren't favorable, right? If you have a headwind, you may
Right.
not have enough battery to come back home. So
Yep.
what we've done is we have a dynamic battery failsafe that takes into account a variety of variables and automatically initiates return to home, based on the fact of, basically the autopilot asks itself, do I have enough battery to return home constantly throughout the operation? The moment the answer approaches no, it'll immediately initiate RTH and warn the user.
Okay. Wow. That's significant. You're right. I mean, if you're way out there because you've just been flying for, over an hour and you've got 20% battery, just even trying to do that math in your own head, I think that just makes my head hurt thinking about it. But that's an excellent safety feature. So really important stuff. So let's talk about some of these milestones because you mentioned them. You talked about the very first big purchase of the Switch by the Indian military years ago, and many, many milestones along the way. So Let's hit some of the more significant ones and, end obviously on the most recent one.
So I think the most significant ones for me are recently we celebrated 400,000 end customer flights. So that
Whoa.
was a big moment for all of us. Yeah, I mean it's pretty great because the numbers actually ramped up pretty exponentially, and we were all super excited when we finally hit that 400,000 number. So that was one that was a big number for us, and based on just how often our customers are flying today, I think every 5 or 6 minutes, an ideaForge drone takes off. That's just the volume of operations our customers are doing today.
Wow.
And also, just as a consequence of kind of being, you could say, the flag bearers of the UAV industry in India, not only have we had to engineer products to physically fly, we've also had to teach customers and educate them about drones and sometimes even train them for drone flights. And even that number, we have trained over 3,000 customers to fly just as an OEM. So that as well is a big milestone for us.
Well, that is, and honestly, I love that you're doing that. I know you talked with Maggie about this on Clubhouse, and John McBride jumped in. He had been doing training for Autel, and now is back out on his own. But um, you know, not everybody does that, right? And every drone is different.
Yeah.
And I imagine, every company is different. Every drone within that company is different. I imagine the training for the Switch, which is a fixed wing, is different than the training. I'm sure some similarities, but for your Netra V4 Pro. So,
Absolutely.
so do you do this training? Do you have like a training location at your headquarters, or do you go out, or both?
So we do both. And in fact, you're absolutely correct in saying the training for a V4 Pro would be different than the training for a Switch, but we actually go a level deeper with our customers and we even train them on how to do mapping. We train them on GIS concepts because sometimes a lot of our customers are completely fresh to GIS, but they need that data. And
Right.
for our customers doing ISR missions, the training is completely different. So we kind of see it as you can say high school and college. High school would be like your basic pilot training where you need to understand the aerodynamic concepts of roll, pitch, yaw. You need to understand the aviation terminology. You may even need to learn on how to communicate with ATC, right? Those are the basics of having something up in the air safely. The next step is training them on the outcomes where that which is actually going to give them value as an organization. Whether it's intelligence about the other side or whether it's data that can give you disproportionate business impact. So those are the kind of trainings we also do. And just one more very recent milestone. I just want, sorry to sort of circle back to
Oh
that, but
no, please do.
one thing I really wanted to mention is we're finally listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange in India. So we are a public company now, and that was a huge moment for us. I think we were the first drone company on the main board in India. So that was a big milestone for us. Very recent one as well.
Well, congratulations. And I know you didn't mention this. Well, you kind of indirectly did. Another milestone is you've kind of opened up a presence in the US. In fact, I
Yeah.
didn't say it earlier, but Colby Duke, I think, is on your team. He was out there in the chat doing a little claps for you earlier. So I wanted to give a shout out to Colby. But tell us about this, your aspirations in the US market and where you guys kind of set up shop in the US.
Yeah, so I think aspirationally, the reason we've been very careful in just picking these two products, right, is because we feel that these are two products that give the most differentiation globally. And we really want to introduce American customers to these products first. And there's also a reason for that. And the reason is that we really see the our customers in the US as those customers who have a need for high flight time, right? Not every drone use case is a high flight time use case. So we really think today that that's an underserved market, and that's something we really want to start demonstrating to American customers. So we've in fact spoken to a lot of customers who didn't even know that there are a lot of drones in the market that actually give you a mission flight time of more than 40 minutes, and we've been doing 60 minutes for 5 years, 5+ years.
Wow.
So I think in the US market, our main goal right now is just to reach out to these customers, give them demonstrations and get their feedback, and see where things go from there. We really just want to show what we have to those customers, find those use cases, right, where they need the high flight time, and just get feedback. I think those are our main aspirations within the next few months in the US.
Well, Raghav, the other thing I'm going to say is, the ability to fly in extreme conditions is critical. I'm in Colorado, and we've had companies come here with their drones and they couldn't get them off the ground because of the elevation. And, some of the most important use cases from a societal standpoint could be up in the mountains, right? Whether it's search and
Yeah.
rescue, which I know is what some of your public safety folks have used the Switch for, and probably now the Netra V4 Pro. And so don't discount the fact that you are uniquely also postured to go into these conditions, whether it's Colorado, North Dakota. They used to say in the United States Air Force, where I was a member, why not, my not, freezing's the reason, because it's cold. I mean, a place where you have to plug your battery into your car overnight so it'll start in the morning. Think about that when you think about drones and getting them off the ground and getting them flying for an hour and a half. I mean, so anyway, I'm excited to see, what you guys can do here. So many opportunities, I think, for you, and the way you've purposefully built resiliency into your design, I think, is very critical. By the way, speaking of Colorado, shout out to Tracy LaTourette. She was in the chat saying, great conversation. Thanks for sharing. She is the first lady fighter pilot of Colorado.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, and Tracy will actually be on our Full Crew podcast next Monday. So everybody, please join in then. But I met Tracy through the Wings Over the Rockies Museum in Denver. She just hosted a PBS special. I did one on drones and eVTOLs. And I think obviously I might have converted her into a drone fan, which is a big deal for a fighter pilot. She did a show on the F-35, and really, really phenomenal job. So thanks, Tracy, for watching. Appreciate you. And I'm looking forward to Monday. But, I think what you guys are doing is great. So your headquarters then, did you guys set up in
San Antonio.
San Antonio? Oh my gosh.
San
So
Antonio.
one of my earlier duty assignments in the military was in San Antonio, Texas. I lived there for 4 years, and my oldest son was born there. I love that town. So interesting. Why San Antonio? I mean, it is very close to Austin, which is somewhat of a tech hub. But why did you guys pick San Antonio?
I think we incorporated in Texas for a variety of reasons, and we explored a lot of places, and I think San Antonio just made the most sense for a first step logistically. And also Colby is very close as well, so it just made a lot of sense logistically. I mean, ultimately we have to serve whoever we can serve wherever they are in the US, so uh, we'll figure that out. But for now, San Antonio was the first step, and it made the most sense for us at the time.
Well, and didn't you guys just participate in a demo in the US somewhere recently?
Yes,
I thought I read this on social media somewhere. I follow you guys.
So, yeah. Oh, awesome. Yeah, so we flew at CUAV. That was one demo where I was personally at, and we've also done a bunch of other demos. There was one in Ohio that we did, and we also did one down in Chula Vista, in fact, for the IDES event, the DFR event, where we did a flight of the Netra V4, the 60-minute version, not the 90-minute version. But yeah, we've been doing some demos, but I think the goal for the next few months is just to get more systems and just to ramp up those demo numbers. Like I said, the next few months for us is all about getting product in front of customers and getting their feedback.
No, awesome. And DFR is drone as first responder. We've got a lot of public safety folks deploying drones. When they get that 911 call, instead of sending a foot patrol or someone in a car, they'll go ahead and fly a drone just to get eyes on the scene and see, okay, what resources do we need to send? And it's really a game changer, I think, for society, this drone as first responder use case. So that's awesome that you were out at Chula Vista. They are pioneers in DFR. In fact, I think they even coined the term, and been doing amazing things out there in California. Okay, so we only have 5 minutes left. I knew our time was going to fly. We've not talked about like the whole slew of drones that you guys have in your repertoire. We haven't really talked about your software products. You have 2 different significant software products. And you're also kind of, I think you, and you're both of your drones that we're talking about primarily with that US focus are type certified, which is a big deal because we don't have a lot of those here. So I'm going to give you this opportunity to talk about what it is I missed that you really wanted to highlight before we end the show about any of those topics, whether it's the software, the certification process, or any other of your drones or solutions.
I think the one main thing I wanted to highlight is one of our software products, Bluefire Live.
Okay.
And what I love about this product is it's a piece of software we've built directly optimized for our drones. So it's essentially an app you can download on your phone or on your laptop, and you get a live stream of the drone wherever it's flying anywhere in the world. All you need is internet. And not only that, but you can also control the payload of the drone from this application. So usually you would have to rely on a third party to build out a solution like this, or on a system integrator. This is something that the OEM gives you. And in fact, we also offer a 30-day free trial for any of our customers who want to test this. In fact, what we've even done with Bluefire Live now is gone a step ahead. And what we've realized, in fact, is a lot of public safety customers have already invested a lot of money in their existing infrastructure. It may even be a network of CCTVs, as an example. So
Right.
Bluefire Live also has a module that turns the drone into essentially a flying CCTV from a standards perspective, a protocol perspective. So you can essentially just integrate our drone into your existing hardware and software using Bluefire Live without having to invest in a brand new solution or brand new hardware. So it's a really interesting piece of software, and we're really excited to bring that to the US alongside both our drones as well.
Well, anytime you can save people money and time, of course, by allowing some integration into their existing system and infrastructure is key. For the US military, they also have been focusing more recently on this thing they call MOSA, right? Modular Open Systems Approach, and that idea of plug and play. So I think that's really key. All right, we're getting close to time here, Raghav. So I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about your future plans because you've come such a long way. You now have a US presence. We're at the end of 2023 here, which I cannot believe, rolling into 2024. What do you project as the future of the next year and maybe even beyond for ideaForge?
The next year in the US for us is all about finding those customers who value our flight time, getting in front of them with product, and just showing them the immense value we can bring. And I think everything else will follow suit. Those are going to be our primary goals for 2024.
All right, spectacular. And we talked about your headquarters in San Antonio and some of the demos you've done. Where can people find you physically? Where you guys might be at? Where might you be out and about next year? Whether it's
Uh,
shows or demos or otherwise.
For a demo of the best way to reach us is to reach out to Colby. I'll be dropping his email in the chat. And also, we are planning to be in a bunch of shows next year, or hopefully the same shows as this year. So keep an eye on our social media to figure out where you can find us next.
Yeah, absolutely follow these guys. They've got a lot going on. And like I said, I've been, since I first ran into you, we've been having this theme. I feel like if there's a theme of this show, there's a lot of accidental things, right? I think you used that term earlier. I don't really believe in accidents. I think everything happens for a reason. And when I ran into you guys at the commercial UAV show, I was like a fan from the start. When I was able to lift up that drone and it was so easy and I saw that backpack, I'm like, man, this is something. So it's a real honor to have you on the show. And thanks again to Volatus Aerospace for endowing your appearance as part of their Above and Beyond series. And it looks like we've got Colby's contact information. There we go. We got that up. So that's great. So as we close here today, Raghav, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just super excited. Super happy to show off what we built in India for the US market, and we hope to get some great feedback from customers over there. And we hope to be here for a long time. We're not a startup anymore, and we hope to stay the distance in the US.
Well, sounds great, and we'll keep an eye on you for sure. So, again, pleasure to have you on the show. Everybody else, we are out here.